We're going to talk about the structure and function of flowers today. We're going to cover the individual parts of the flower as well as discuss the different types of flowers. This is useful information for you, not only for your homework tomorrow, your test next week, but in the future, I'm sure you'll cover flowers. So do your best to learn what you can and you'll make it easier on yourself later on. So, why do plants have flowers? Let's talk about flowering plants a little bit. Where would we be without flowering plants? Well, I can tell you where I'd be. I'd be hungry because most of our crop and horticulturally important plants are flowering plants. So, why do plants have flowers? Well, really, it's all about survival. Think about it. I mean, if you're a plant in a meadow with thousands of other plants, how are you going to compete for light, for soil and nutrients, for water? Flowers give a plant an upper edge. First, flowers allow interaction with pollinators, wind, water, especially insects, animals, birds. It also promotes genetic variability because that pollen is being spread cross-pollinating a compatible species. And then also, flowers provide fruit. Let's talk about pollination. I've already mentioned many ways in which pollination can take place. The wind can carry pollen from flower to flower, insects, water, birds, mammals. Of course, in the horticulture industry, we rely heavily upon bees, insects, especially bees. And how does this occur? Well, the pollen sticks to the side of the bee. The bee then flies from flower to flower through the field. Many of those flowers can cross pollinate with each other. This brings us to the next advantage of flowers, and that is it creates genetic variability. So let's look at these flowers. Obviously, they're related. When we look at their phenotypes, remember, phenotype is really just the genes on display. We can tell that these flowers are related. The only difference really is the color. So how does this happen? Well, cross-pollination. It's the movement of pollen from one flower to another, only between compatible species. Let's now talk about the last benefit that flowers provide for the plant. Flowers create fruit, and within that fruit are seeds. When you have a seed that's encased in a beautiful red cherry, for instance, a bird comes along, eats that cherry, and then flies far away from the mother plant to deposit the seed. This is a great advantage, for it lessens the competition on the mother plant. Now let's begin talking about the individual parts of the flower. I want you to remember that form follows function. As we go over these structures, I want you to try to remember what is their form, what is their function. Let's look at the sepals. We see in the picture above that there's one bud that is totally encased by the sepals. The sepals are protecting that developing bud. The reproductive parts inside that developing bud need time to mature. The petals in the other picture attract pollinators. As you can see from the columbine, you see these deep spurs. Within the spurs are nectaries, and they produce nectar. And of course, this is going to attract all different types of pollinators. So their form follows their function. Next, let's talk about the reproductive parts of the flower. First, we have the staminate parts, the male parts. This consists of the anther and the filament, which collectively are called the stamen. Then we also have the female parts, or the pistillate parts. These are the stigma, the style, and the ovary, collectively called the pistil. So now let's put all these parts together. We have the sepals, we have the petals, we have our reproductive parts. What does this create? It creates a complete flower. In order for a flower to be complete, it must have all four parts. These are called whorls, and they are attached to the receptacle. The sepals collectively are called the calyx. The petals collectively are called the corolla. Then, of course, we have the reproductive parts, which consist of the staminate, male flower parts, and the pistillate, the female flower parts. All four whorls must be present in order for a flower to be called complete. In this illustration, we see a complete flower. What I want you to notice is that the receptacle where each whorl is attached, all four whorls are attached, is the swollen end of the pedicle. The first whorl is the calyx. These are the sepals, and as I said earlier, they protect the developing bud. The second whorl is the corolla. It consists of the petals, and of course, petals attract pollinators. It's interesting to note that the petal size, shape, and colors often determine the type of pollinator. For instance, red is a favorite of hummingbirds. I also want to note that the calyx and the corolla together are called the perianth. The third whorl are the staminate male flower parts. These consist of the anther and the filament, which collectively are called the stamen. How do I remember these names? Well, a male deer has antlers. A male flower has anthers. And as you see, filament and stamen both have the word men in them. Our last whorl, the fourth whorl, consists of the pistillate or the female flower parts. These are the stigma, the style, and the ovary. The stigma is sticky. This accepts the pollen. If the pollen is compatible, then we can have fertilization of that flower, cross-pollination. The style has the same form and function as the filament. It is a stalk that gives height to the stigma to aid in pollination. The ovary is where fertilization occurs. The ovary becomes the fruit. Within the ovary are ovules, and they become the seeds. Notice how the ovary in this picture sits down inside the receptacle. This is called an inferior ovary because the ovary sits below where the whorls attach to the receptacle. If the ovary sits above where the whorls attach to the receptacle, it's called a superior ovary. This is a picture of a complete flower. You can clearly see all four whorls, the sepals, the petals, even the male and female reproductive parts. The next type of flowers we're going to talk about are incomplete flowers. These are flowers that are missing one or more whorls. This can include the sepals, the calyx, the corolla or the petals, or it could also mean that they are missing either their male or female reproductive parts. Perfect flowers have both male and female reproductive parts. However, perfect flowers can be complete or incomplete. Grass is a good example of an incomplete, perfect flower. Imperfect flowers, on the other hand, are either staminate, male flowers, or pistillate, female flowers. You can see in the picture above that the fruit has already formed at the base of the female flower. So what effect do these flower types have on plants? Well, if you have imperfect flowers on the same plant, it's called monoecious. That means you have male and female flowers on the same plant, like corn. The tassels are the male part, the ears are the female parts, or cucumbers, where the male and female flowers bloom at separate times. Dioecious plants, on the other hand, are either male or female. That means they only bear female flowers on one plant and male flowers on the other plant. Kiwi fruit, asparagus, and buffalo grass are good examples of dioecious plants. Well, there you have it. Everything you wanted or needed to know about the structure and function of flowers. Well, maybe not everything. Good luck on your homework and good luck on your test. And as always, I've included a last slide with all the definitions. Good luck.